sharing my screen. Here, wait a minute. I need to start my video. Now we're humming. Okay. All right. So, why is that working? So, don't worry about this. All right. So, you guys saw this lecture online. Basically, the basic structure of how this class is going to work is we're going to talk about in greater detail some of the stuff from the online lectures in class. So if we skip a couple slides, don't let that scare you. If you've already taken notes on these lectures from what you watched online, that's fine. Just kind of add to your notes where we spent some time talking, okay? So that's basically how these classes are going to work, so that if you are out sick or aren't in class, you're not really getting all that behind. But there is going to still be some, information discussed. So first things first, starting out of the gate, if we're going to talk about a sociology of law class, it's really helpful to define what in the world law is, right? And this is a extremely difficult definition. So what is law? How would you explain to an alien, right? What about your discussion post assignment? Explain to an alien who comes down to the earth what law is. How would you do it? Did you guys all just leave your discussion post blank? Go ahead.
I would say that it's different in every society, and it governs people according to like the socially accepted norms.
So it governs people to socially accepted norms. That's actually a pretty good definition, but what are some problems with that definition? And by the way, every definition has problems with it. So like, I'm not picking on anybody if I push back, okay? But governs people with socially accepted norms. There's kind of two elements to that definition, right? What are they? That it governs people, right? That's pretty good, right? Law governs people. Does it govern all people in all circumstances? It's supposed to, but not necessarily, right? There's a lot of interesting ideas about how the law does and doesn't govern people. For example, right, and using current events, 17-year-old kid in Wisconsin. How in the world did he get a hold of an AR-15? Is it illegal for him to own one? It's not actually illegal for him to own one, right? It's illegal to purchase one. You get given one as a gift, it's not technically illegal. Is that odd? Alcohol's not like that, right? You're not allowed to drink it if you're under 21, right? Cigarettes, you're not allowed to smoke if you're under 21. Guns, you're just not allowed to purchase. But you can be gifted a gun if you're under 21, or for rifles, it's usually 18. So governs people, I think that's a pretty good idea. How about socially accepted norms? What's the socially accepted norm when you're driving down 95? How fast are you supposed to go? According to social acceptance. A lot of people think 95 is the speed limit, right? They keep passing signs and say 95, why not go 95, right? Is that legal? Not really, but the socially accepted norm at a stop sign is to do what? Is that socially accepted? Everyone stops at stop signs? A bunch of weird drivers. Is it the socially accepted norm to slow down, look around, make sure no one else is coming, then just keep going? How many of you make sure your wheels stop and sit there for 2 or 3 seconds before you drive? My wife does that too. That drives me nuts. Oh my God. Yeah, well, let me know when you're on the road so I can avoid you. All right. So, what are some other ways that we would define law? How can we edit that definition to make it a little tighter? Because clearly laws are not socially accepted norms in every capacity, right? Is it enough to say laws are rules that govern people? What's wrong if I just stop and govern people? So they also protect people. So it's not just a governing aspect, but also, so that's true, right? It doesn't just necessarily govern, but aren't there all sorts of rules we have to follow that govern us that aren't law? How many of you had a curfew growing up? Is that two of you? Lord, no, nice parents. Those are rules, right? That's not the law. The police aren't going to come after you if you skip curfew, right? Unless you got real strict parents. Then they might call the police, right? So we have all sorts of rules to be on Flagler's campus, right? If you are walking the wrong way down Keenan Hall and security sees you, can they reprimand you for that? If you're walking through the courtyard without your mask on, is it a city ordinance that you have to have a mask in the courtyard on campus? That's a Flagler rule, right? You get in trouble for it, but it's not law. So governs people, as long as there's qualifications to that governing, maybe is a good start to a definition, but you can't just say laws govern people either, right? Or if we add safety, laws govern people and keep them safe. Your parents saying, I don't want you to put your hand on a hot stove, keeps you safe. You won't go to jail for doing that, not go to the hospital. But so the point, right, of this, and we won't belabor this point too much, is it's very, very complicated to try and define what law is and what law isn't, right? Especially in our society when we have so many different types of law. What are some of the major types of law that we have? Anybody? Right, so those fall under what umbrella term? Is it different if I get arrested versus if someone sues me? What are those distinctions? Criminal law versus civil law, right? If I get a speeding ticket, where do I go? Traffic court, right? What if I want to get divorced? Divorce court or family law court in some capacity, especially if I have kids, right? So there's a lot of different if I'm a juvenile, there's juvenile court. So we have a lot of different types of law in our society also that are completely separate and apart from rules that we have in our workplace or in our homes too, right? So this is definitely, by the way, a multiple choice question on your exam. Probably more scholarship has gone into defining and explaining the concept of what. How fun, right? You're welcome. Write that down. So law is probably one of the most common concepts studied in sociology, and more research and scholarship has been dedicated to this fact than any other, or this topic than any other topic in sociology. Why do you think that is? What is sociology the study of? Society. How do you know what society is? How do we define society? So a group of people that live in a particular place, that's a pretty good definition of society. Usually, how do we differentiate the different places? Borders, state borders, county borders, country borders, right? And there's different laws in all of those different communities or societies that are governing how that society functions, right? So we have to, by kind of extension of studying sociology, study and understand the laws in different places. Are the laws the same county to county, city to city, state to state? We have very different laws, and because of that we have very different societies. It's very different living in downtown Miami than it is in downtown St. Augustine, right? Why? Number one, the average age of downtown St. Augustine is what, 104, 105, right? Downtown Miami, it's like what, 25 in my mind, based on the Pitbull videos. Seems like there's a lot of young people. So, but also there's different laws that govern how things function in these different societies. The Embassy Suites on the beach. Have any of y'all been there? It's delightful, right? It is not, In St. Johns County, you are not allowed to build a hotel on the beach without permission from the county to go over 3 stories tall. That is a law in St. Johns County. Is that a law in Miami-Dade County? No. It's a 3-story building. They don't want it. It has to be 300 stories, right? Big old buildings down there. I'm not sure it's 300 stories. That's probably an exaggeration. So there are some traditional definitions of law, and let's pick apart some of these, because these are not necessarily the best definitions of law, right? Cardozo, the Supreme Court Justice, suggests that that law is a principle of rule of conduct so established as to justify a prediction with reasonable certainty that it will be enforced by the courts if its authority is challenged. What don't we like about this definition? Principle of rule of conduct so established as to justify a prediction with reasonable certainty that it will be enforced by the courts if its authority is challenged. Do we just love this definition? I think there's nothing wrong with it. Good.
Well, I think it doesn't, there's only new laws being added, and I don't know if it totally encompasses that some laws are not necessarily cohesive throughout the tribes that are made anyway.
So it doesn't necessarily capture the dynamic nature of law. Laws are constantly changing, laws are getting added, laws are getting taken away, laws are getting augmented, right? What's one of the big problems we have? Go ahead.
Well, I guess just the last line, that was the authority is challenged. It doesn't say that it is really enforced, right? As long as it's having it, I don't know.
Right. So that's actually the part that I wrote. A prediction with reasonable certainty that it will be enforced by the courts if its authority is challenged. So number one, who has to enforce it? The courts have to, right? It can only be enforced by the courts. Are there times that the police enforce the law but you never have to go to court? Certainly. Right? Has anyone ever gotten a warning or a speeding ticket and just paid it? Didn't go to court, didn't challenge it in any capacity? With reasonable certainty that it will be enforced by the courts. Aren't there laws that are broken all the time that the courts never really enforce? Why? Why don't the courts enforce them? There's going to be a number of reasons why the courts don't enforce them, but why? Why don't the courts? What are some of the reasons?
There's so many reasons. Like the population is so big, I don't think the courts can like the courts and make sure that they follow the rules.
Right, so the courts can't possibly enforce every law violation. Right? There's too many of them. What's another reason? Go ahead.
Not everything is severe enough.
Not everything's severe enough to even warrant the court's attention. Why else? Don't raise your hand with this, right? But how many of you have or know someone who has drank underage or done illegal drugs, but also never got caught? Is the law's authority is the law's authority challenged by someone drinking underage or doing illegal drugs? Sure, it's the authority is challenged, but the courts don't know the authority is challenged. And in fact, I would argue that the vast majority of underage people who drink underage or do drugs never get caught. I'm not suggesting you should do it. Please don't interpret this as me condoning that. But if you never get caught, can the court challenge this? Not really. So let's go on to a quote by Justice Holmes. This is the prophecies already, how exciting, in the biblical word. The prophecies of what the courts will do, in fact, and nothing more pretentious, are what I mean by the law. So basically, it's not what the courts might reasonably enforce. It's all I mean by the law is what the courts do. That is all law is, nothing else is law. What do we think about that? Why is this definition unsatisfying? Is it unsatisfying? If the vast majority of people who drink underage don't get caught, that means the courts aren't enforcing anything. The courts aren't actually doing anything. So does that make drinking underage legal? Based on this definition, wouldn't it? If you don't get caught, the court does nothing about it. You didn't ever actually break the law because the court didn't do anything. Now, some might argue in a very strict kind of philosophical sense, that's true, right? If you don't get in trouble for something, did you really do anything wrong? Try that in next relation, or argument you have with your boyfriend or girlfriend. Well, you didn't catch me for a long time, so I didn't think it was wrong. See, let me know. I promise you it would still get me beat by the way. All right? So this definition isn't necessarily all that satisfying either, because it's basically suggesting if you don't get caught, no harm, no foul, right? Weber. This definition, doesn't this look like it would be a perfect multiple choice question? Like, which of the following is not one of the things Max Weber said is a part of law? Isn't that beautiful? The way it's just laid out so beautifully here. I'll write that down. That looks like it would be a perfect multiple choice question. So Weber suggests an order will be called a law if it is externally guaranteed. This is important. Externally, not internally, externally guaranteed by the probability that coercion, either physical or psychological, to bring about conformity or avenge violence or violation, will be applied by a staff of people holding themselves especially ready for that purpose. Suddenly it seems like we're getting somewhere with the definition of law, right? So the pressure to comply must be external, right? There's some outside force telling you you have to do this thing. More likely than not, in most situations, it's not in your best interest to do this thing, right? For example, is it ever in your best interest to stop at a red light? Why not? Why do we have red lights? Is anyone ever like, thank God I caught that red light? I was going to get there too early. I'm so happy I get to sit traffic now. So what's the purpose of a red light or a traffic signal in general?
To avoid traffic.
To avoid what?
Traffic.
To avoid traffic? Well, doesn't it cause traffic? To avoid, we're really trying to avoid what? Accidents, right? We all make an agreement when we get in the car. I'm going to pay attention to that paint sprayed on the road and those light bulbs in the sky because it's in society's best interest that I stop at this red light and give someone else a turn. The reality is, what's in my best interest is everyone gets the hell out of my way and let me go where I'm going, right? Who gets those privileges though? President and like governors and stuff, right? And the UF cheerleading team when we're going to a hostile stadium, which is always a fun time. Oh, and I guess the football team gets it too. But the pressure has to be external. It's not in your best interest to follow the traffic laws. So if you don't follow the traffic laws, we're going to make sure that you feel pressure to follow them by giving you a ticket or taking away your license in some capacity, right? Which is significantly more inconvenient. The pressure must involve coercion or force. What good is a law if there are no consequences to it? If I said to you, you cannot park your car on the street right outside, we'll all be very disappointed in you. How many of you care if I'm disappointed or not? For those of you online, that was nobody. Just so you know, nobody cares about me, in my opinion. However, if you get a $100 ticket or your car gets towed, well, maybe that's a little worse, right? And so the pressure to comply, or the pressure must involve coercion or force in some capacity. Do this or else. And then officials must exist to apply this force. Notice how this doesn't clarify that it's courts must exist. It's officials in some capacity. That could be police, that could be courts, that could be correctional officials. Some sort of governmental officials have to be present to apply this force. That involves coercion and is external to the individual. So we're starting to get a better definition of law. Don Black is a lot easier, right? He just says law is governmental social control, right? It's the normative life of a state and its citizens, such as legislation, litigation, and adjudication, right? Social control. What is social control? We don't realize how much social control we're under all the time, right? When you walk into this classroom on the first day, a lot of you have never had me as a professor before. How did you know where to sit when you walked in? Why didn't anyone come up here and use this? Is that a weird idea? Because you know your role is a student, and students sit at the desk, and the professor stands up here. What if you walked into class and I said, all right, everyone, I know you all sat wherever you want to, but stand up, we're going to sit in alphabetical order. What would y'all do? You'd probably say, wow, this feels like middle school. But where would you sit? Alphabetical order. Because for some reason, even though you have never met me before, you're under the impression that for some reason I am some sort of authority figure. And I don't know why, because I'm 5'8". Most of you could beat me up. I'm very soft, right? Yet for some reason I'm given a tremendous amount of deference because social control says, basically, when I'm in a classroom, the professor's in charge, I'm a student, I sit there and take notes and do what he or she says, right? Don Black argues all law is governmental social control. Isn't it odd that we listen more to the paint that's spray painted on the road than we do to the rules our parents give us? We pay attention to the light bulbs in the sky. Do you ever see someone at a red light just sitting there just saying, screw it, I'm going, even though there's oncoming traffic, they just go? No, no one really does that unless the police are behind them chasing them, right? More or less, everyone follows. Maybe there's one or two people that run the light right when it turns red, but overwhelmingly, we all follow the light bulbs. We follow the paint. If I were to ask you deep down, why is murder illegal? Why don't we kill somebody? If you get mad at someone, why don't you just kill them? We might try and come up with moral reasons for why it's bad or not bad, but is there really any good, strong reason not to kill somebody other than we might get in trouble for it? Not really, right? And so, so Don Black is arguing that's all law is the government telling us what we can and can't do. That's actually a really good definition of law, right? All it is the government telling us what the normative life of the state is with its citizens. The state is telling its citizens, here's how you're going to behave if you live in this state. And that's it. Obviously, several styles of law can exist in a society as well. These are all, again, this lecture is online, so I'm not going to go over all these because you should know what these are. There are other definitions of law. Again, we can talk about some of these actually, right? A system of rules and regulations, that's easy enough. Of course, that's not satisfying as a general definition because this classroom has rules and regulations, right? Read the syllabus. A form of value inquiry. Well, that's kind of a good idea, right? Laws show us where society puts value on things, but is that always true? Not necessarily. When it was illegal for gay people to get married, maybe society did value gay people less. When the Supreme Court said gay people are allowed to get married, did society in general say, okay, well, we used to not like gay people, now we like them? Not necessarily, right? A regime for conflict resolution, right? You need somewhere to settle conflicts. The law allows you to do that. A reflection of popular will is kind of the same as value inquiry issues. And then, and this is one that we don't think about or talk about a lot, but depending on your perspective on law, Law could be a regime to preserve inequality and the denial of freedom. How in the world is that the case? How does that make sense? What kind of perspective would you have to take to say, well, how is law preserving inequality and denying freedom? Using the, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Law could be a way to keep the power in power and the non-powerful.
Right, so if the law is a way to keep the powerful, could be a way to keep the powerful in power, right? What are some examples of laws that might be used to keep the powerful in power? Or transitively, laws used to keep the oppressed oppressed.
Can I use the Filipino law?
Sure.
Okay. I know in the Philippines they're trying to pass a law right now which basically is changing, it's basically eliminating free speech. So if you speak out against the government, you're classified as a terrorist.
Okay, so that, I mean, that would be a really good example. If you speak out against the government, you're considered a terrorist. Let's go with something in this hemisphere and actually in this country, right? But something that people don't think about. You get arrested, thrown in jail, right? Weirdly, you still have bills to pay back at home, right? What happens to those bills while you're in jail or in prison? Does the government say, we'll take over them for you? No. Not only does the government say, are you still responsible for them when you get out, maybe 20 years later, what else is the company legally allowed to do while you're in jail or prison? Allow interest to just keep on growing. So not only are you getting out of prison after 20 years, having to find a job and trying to support yourself, who else is coming knocking at your door? Bill collector saying, hey, why don't you pay this bill for 20 years? Oh, well, I was in prison. It's kind of hard to get a stable 9 to 5 while I'm in prison. Did you not get my letters? Nope. And not only that, but you may have only owed $100 on your electric bill, but 20 years later at 5% interest, that's grown into a $6,000 bill. So I made that math up. So but that's $6,000 you now owe us for your $100 electric bill. Is that cash, check, or credit? Is that kind of a problem that might help keep somebody oppressed? It certainly could be. More recently in Florida, there was this, the Florida population passed a constitutional amendment that said felons, after they get out of prison and have finished their jail sentences or their prison sentences, can vote. The state of Florida said that only counts if they've also paid off all their fees. One side says that seems fair because they should complete their sentence, right? That's part of their sentence. The other side says that's not fair because it might take them years to pay off their fees. And so we're not allowing them to vote for years. And so there's these laws that might be put in place to try and help keep people oppressed and maintain inequality. What do all of these definitions have in common? Number one, the paramount function of law is to regulate and constrain the behavior of individuals in their relationships with one another. So we're trying to control behavior. Law is there to control in some capacity, right? They also suggest that there's a formal system, a guide for action or inaction, and also without interpretation and enforcement, laws would be meaningless. If I said you are only allowed 5 absences before you fail the class, what are some important things you would need to know about that rule? You are allowed 5 absences before I fail you in the class. This is not actually in the syllabus, don't forget about this. But if that was a rule I had, what would you want to know? Does it still count if I get sick? Do sicknesses count as one of the absences? That's a good question. What else would you want to know? What if you show up 30 minutes late? Is that an absence or not? Or are you just tardy? What if you're in class for the whole time, but you fall asleep during class? Does that count as an absence? So we need to define what an absence is, right? Is there a difference between excused and unexcused? Is there a difference between 5 full class sessions? What if I'm just 5 minutes late 15 times? Does those 5 minutes all add up to 3 absences, 4 absences, 5 absences? What if there's a death in the family? What if I'm in class, but I'm actually online shopping the whole time on my computer? Or playing on Instagram? Or I don't know what you guys do on the computer. Do people still play Farmville? I don't know. So without interpretation and enforcement, laws would be meaningless. If I said 5 absences, you fail, and then you're on your 7th absent, and I still don't fail you, I mean, we all had those teachers probably growing up in high school or something that they had all these rules, but then they didn't really enforce any of them. And how was the behavior in those classes? Or whenever there was a substitute, wasn't that the best? Everyone went buck wild whenever there was a substitute class, right? Because what's she gonna do? Or he gonna do? They're gone the next day, right? Push outside the quiz too. So, the problem with the laws. So did you guys? I don't know if anyone has the book yet, but did you guys read? Those who have the book, The Parable of the Map? It was in the foreword. Does anyone have the book yet? You have the book. You just didn't open it yet.
No, I haven't read it.
You read it? Did you read The Parable of the Map?
Yeah.
What happens in The Parable of the Map?
Basically, talking about like if there's in town, someone was talking about like his journey or something, and talking about the end, how like the point of the class and the point while reading the book is to like questioning your own.
Right. So basically, right? Basically, I found it's very good. Father is showing his son a journey he went on. And his son says, wow, I now understand what you went through on that journey because you showed me a map. So using an equivalent, in 2016, I got married. 1,000 hearts broke. Mostly because my wife got married. No one cared that I got married. They all said, wow, really? Someone wanted to marry you. We went on our honeymoon to Italy. We flew into Rome, spent a day in Rome, took a train to Florence, and then ended up in Venice, and then flew back to America. We had a lot of Italian food, drank a lot of Italian wine, Italian coffee, and it was magical. Do any of you feel like you need to go to Italy now? There's no need. I just told you all about it. Is that how it works? It's kind of like going to the Biltmore. I've seen the pictures. Is it the same as looking at pictures as opposed to going yourself? If I said Italian pizza, it's like mellow mushroom, just a little better. Do you need to taste Italian pizza to understand what Italian pizza is like? Yeah, you don't really know what it's like to be somewhere unless you do it yourself. Now, granted, there are some things you don't need to do yourself. I've never been shot, but I have a pretty good idea I don't want to do it. It doesn't look fun. So, however, what's said to be wise often rules out what could be important. I have never, ever played tackle football in my life because of my project physique, right? I watched football a lot. I actually watched Austin Peay versus who they play, Central Tennessee. Yeah, something in football. I was pumped college football was back, and I watched 2 teams I never heard of before, right? But I could watch it and say, wow, that was a great play. And if someone said, explain to me why that was a great play, I could say because the offense gained 30 yards, or because the middle linebacker just took someone's head off took a running back's head off in the pocket, right? I could not tell you for the life of me how to play football, though, right? I can understand, I can recognize if there's a hold, I can recognize if it's intentional grounding or a chop block, right? But I can't coach those guys into how to avoid a chop block or how to avoid targeting. I don't think anyone can coach how to avoid targeting because no one knows what that rule is. But there's a difference between having kind of a head knowledge of how things kind of sort of work and living through a situation, right? You will have more experience by living the law, right, than by just studying it in a kind of abstract sense. So what are our goals in studying the law? Why do we have a class on this? Basically, the point of this class is to get you to question what you know about the law, right? Why is murder legal or illegal, or rape, or burglary, or any number of other crimes? Why can you drink at 21 but join the military at 18, right? So we trust you to blast a hole in the side of a building in a tank, but if you're at White Line playing slap the bag, it's a huge problem, right? Why? Why do we have those differences? And also, these are the benefits of many definitions. We all have different ideas about what the law is. And even in society today, right? We hear people say all the time, if you just don't argue with the police, just comply and you won't get shot, right? But then we also see videos of someone not arguing with the police, just minding their own business and still getting roughed up or killed by the police. And so we're talking past each other because we have different definitions and different perspectives on the law, right? So we all have our kind of initial maps. We've all seen maps, we've all watched TV shows. We all have a kind of sophomoric understanding of what the law is in some capacity. However, the purpose of this class is we're going to, as a class, kind of take the journey together through perspectives on the law. And hopefully, by the end of the class, we'll be able to recognize other people's perspectives to where if someone says something, we don't just throw out some sort of political catchphrase or punchline, but we can say, I recognize where you're coming from, and then I can then have a discussion with you on the same perspective, as opposed to viewing things from two polar opposite perspectives and talking past each other and not accomplishing it, right? So with that being said, does anyone have any questions about anything? Any comments or concerns? Does everyone know what's expected of them and when stuff is due? All right, I'm going to stop this and we are going to